SA economy is designed to serve foreign interests. An incredible video done by Ntate Moeletsi Mbeki on YouTube. And I'd like to share it with you. But I'd like to say I'm one of the guilty parties, but as much as I've read my South African history, but I did not know my South African history well enough to be as conscious as I would have loved to be at my age. As much as I keep learning all of this information that I keep learning about our SA history, about politics, and as my knowledge keeps growing, when I bump into videos like these, I start looking at everything differently. I start looking at South African politics differently, the economy differently, the Freedom Charter differently, our political parties differently, and just the system that has kept the black sister, black brother behind, a system that has oppressed all of us. It's so interesting when you listen to Ntate Moeletsi Mbeki speak on this video, and when you start going back to read certain books that you're supposed to read about your South African history. Your mind starts opening up. And we are a few months away from the elections. You know, we've just recorded an episode, myself and Penuel. I was asking him on Virtual Mkuku on Monday, which political party are you going to vote for? He said he doesn't know. And he asked me back the question, who am I going to vote for next year? I gave him the same answer. I said, I don't know. And my question to you is, who are you going to vote for? I'd like for you to watch this video and comment on the comment section.
Who designed this unequal society for us?
Well, our unequal society, many people think it was designed by apartheid, that it was designed by the National Party, if you wish. Actually, this unequal society was designed by the British at the end of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century. Britain, as you may remember, was the colonial power that controlled South Africa from the end of the 18th century. And it set up different types of economies, actually, for South Africa. First, it inherited the slave economy, which had been set up by the Dutch, and it kept that going for about 35 years. And then it abandoned that and abolished slavery and introduced a peasant economy, especially in Natal and in the Eastern Cape, amongst the black population. And then it discovered diamonds and gold. So it abandoned the peasant economy and started dismantling the peasant economy in order to force the men, the African men, to go and work in the diamond mines and the gold mines. In fact, I should make one modification there, was that before the diamond mines, about 10 years before the diamond mines, they decided to grow sugar in South Africa. So they tried to get the people in Natal, which is where the climate for sugar is, to work there, and the Zulus quite widely refused to go and work. So they brought in Indians all the way from India to set up the sugar industry in South Africa. And then eventually they discovered these minerals, and now the British decided, we've had enough of these people. We are going to force them to go and work in the mines. So we're going to dismantle the Zulu kingdom, we're going to dismantle the Boer republics, and we're going to restructure the economy of South Africa so that it serves our purpose, so we get our gold and our diamonds from South Africa. And that's who has structured the economy of South Africa. And it has been running like that since 1910. After they restructured the economy, they looked around and said, who shall we hand over the country to run on our behalf on the economic side? And the Afrikaner elite said, we'll do it. We'll oppress the blacks, we'll make sure they work for nothing. And the British said, that's my man. So they ran the country from 1910 up until 1994, when the blacks revolted. They could no longer take this as suppression. So the British, interestingly, had been supporting the ANC since then quietly. The ANC had an office in London since the 1960s. They said, well, these guys can't keep peace in South Africa anymore. Can you keep peace in South Africa? And by the way, we own the gold mines, we own the diamond mines. So you keep the peace, carry on with the cheap labor, but you deliver the gold and the diamond to us. And the ANC, of course, has been doing that since 1994. It's a long story, complex story, but that in a nutshell is where South Africa is. That's why you were saying we've been treading water for so long. We have been treading water for more than 100 years.
So how much longer will we have to do this? Because as you say, it's a long story, but it's an important story for us to understand and contextualize what we are currently dealing with. But for the longest time, you know, we've been talking about the struggle for liberation in this country, the struggle for economic emancipation. So what was all of that for, if indeed we are not going to change the patterns of the economy in this country?
Well, it was for the inclusion of minorities, in a nutshell. You see, the British system obviously needs certain group to run the country. And these minorities get huge privileges. So if you look at who were running the country between 1910 and 1994, it was essentially the Afrikaner nationalists. And they got enormous privileges, but this is a tiny, it was probably 4% of the South African population. If you take the whole population of South Africa, the Afrikaners were only about 4% of the whole population of South Africa. So these kinds of minorities can be incorporated into this system of the British, and they prosper within that system. Now, they have incorporated the Africans into this system. Again, the African middle class, which is a tiny group, has been incorporated into the small elite. So those benefit, but the vast majority of the people, I mean, South Africa has the highest unemployment in the world and the highest poverty in the world. That just gives you an idea of how many people are left out without benefiting from the economic system that we have in this country.
So coming back to this ticking time bomb, Mr. Mbeki, you know, we've been talking about this for the longest time. And are we just saying this? Is this about platitudes once more? Or is there something that we should really be concerned about at this stage?
Well, the ticking time bomb keeps exploding, and then because we don't know what to do, or the powers that be are happy with the status quo, they soon tell us to forget that the time bomb has had an explosion. We had an explosion in 2012 at Marikana. That was part of the explosion of this time bomb. And so the powers that be suppressed the explosion with ferocious force, 34 people killed and many others injured. And then soon thereafter, they set a commission and whitewashed the whole thing, or should I say blackwashed the whole thing. And we elected one of the protagonists, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, to become president. And of course, he wanted this forgotten because he had written an email saying these people must be crushed. So he wanted us to forget all about that. And he has successfully done that. Nobody talks about Marikana anymore. Then we've had a second explosion of the time bomb, which was in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng in July last year after the imprisonment of Jacob Zuma. Now, these explosions are getting bigger. If you compare Marikana, in Marikana, 34 people were killed by the police. In the recent explosion in July last year, more than 350 people were killed, killed by the people themselves, stampedes and all that. And the police were just sitting there, folding their arms, watching the poor killing each other. So the time bombs are going off, and they're getting bigger. And one day we will be where Ukraine is, if I can give you that example of a big time bomb that is happening in the world today.
But why is government not heeding these calls, Mr. Mbeki? You know, just the other day, and this is why they say comparisons are odious, because it's not a good one. But you look at the numbers of people who have died in Ukraine in a war situation, and you look at just the July unrest in South Africa last year, and those numbers are comparable. And we are not even in a war in South Africa. Why is this acceptable? Why is government not heeding the calls from the people on the ground?
Well, Sakina, you know, the privileged in South Africa are so privileged. The privileged who run the South African government, remember, are so privileged that they see any change as a threat to their privilege. A year or so ago, the finance minister, the then finance minister, Tito Mboweni, pointed out that there were more than 29,000 millionaires who work for the South African government, who are people who earn more than R1 million, who are employed by the civil servants and politicians who are employed by the government. So when these people look at this arrangement and they say, my God, if we change anything, for example, if we start investing in building proper housing instead of allowing the shanty towns, then how are we going to be paid these millions that we get paid? So let's postpone it for another day, and let's wait. Maybe the time bomb, it will be 5 years before it comes, and so they wait.
So just going back to the economy and what it has delivered, quite apart from the failures. So it was discovered very early on, Mr. Mbeki, during this democracy, that the policies after 1994, that economy, and which is still the economy that we have today, only produced a handful of very rich black people, just a layer that had been previously disadvantaged. What about the rest? And why is it seemingly so difficult to actually turn things around to the benefit of the majority of South Africans?
Well, I was reading a report in the newspaper just this morning. The World Bank has started a new study based on South Africa about inequality in Eastern and Southern Africa. They are so alarmed by the levels of inequality that exist in South Africa that they have started a new type of a report about inequality in South Africa and Namibia. So it shows that the world is very concerned about the inability of the ruling party and the ruling governments in South Africa to solve the question of poverty on one hand and extravagant wealth at the other end. But as I say, you know, the rich control the power, and they use the power for their own benefit. And the rich in South Africa include the government official. You know, the South African government is the most expensive government in the world in terms of the salaries that they pay. The salaries as a percentage of gross domestic product, salaries of the civil service are somewhere in the region of about 14% of GDP. Similar countries to South Africa are half of that. They are 6 or 7% of GDP. So the privileged in South Africa are hugely privileged, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And they are not prepared to give up their privileges to build the country. This is why you see it takes forever to build a road in this country. because the privileged don't want to invest. They are not investing, and then blame goes round. The business blames government, government blames business, unions blame government and business, although they are part of government. And so there's this finger pointing that goes on in this country, but no action. And the crisis continues.
And that's it. The sad reality is that all of this speaks to the majority of South Africans who have now lost confidence, almost all confidence, in the ability of the ruling party in South Africa, the ANC and its leadership, to provide them with a better life. And where should South Africans look to now in order to try and save themselves? Because it is clear that government, year after year, term after term, administration after administration, is failing to do this.
Yes, I think, the ANC in 2004 got nearly 70% of the vote. So it shows how much hope the people of South Africa, the voters of South Africa had in the future that the ANC had promised to deliver. In the last election, which was the local government election, the ANC got only 45% of the vote, and it lost all the big metros in Gauteng and most of them and in the Cape. So you can see that the population has lost faith in the ANC. Now, obviously, they have to look to the opposition. So the opposition parties have to come up with a solution. Otherwise, we are going to have even bigger explosions than we had in July last year. So the onus is now on the opposition parties to come up with a model for a better future of South Africa, but one that does not carry on with the old economic policies that we inherited from the British.
So is that the only solution? Does the solution for South Africa and South Africans lie with political parties solely?
Well, Sakina, that's the nature of this animal called democracy. Democracy operates with political parties. You can always have a dictator where you then have one guy who then calls the shots. There are several of them in the world. I won't mention what big countries have those and what small countries have. But the people of South Africa had enough of dictators with the National Party. They will not entertain that. So we, South Africans, want the democratic system. But the democratic system up to now is not delivering the economic dividend. But that is the only option we have, is the political parties. They have to find a new solution that benefits all the people of South Africa. Otherwise, our democracy is going to be dismantled. Then we'll be even worse off than having a democracy.
Well, we have to leave it there, but thanks so much for your time this morning. Moeletsi Mbeki, Deputy Chair of the South African Institute of International Affairs and political analyst, saying that unless South Africa changes its trajectory and reindustrializes the economy, at the very least to accommodate the poor, then the angry masses are on the verge of unleashing a violent uprising against the ruling elite.